The Cervelo Aspero, however you pronounce it. It's got an accent mark there above the A. This was the first gravel bike that I owned about a year ago, and it's a lot of fun to be back on an Aspero after this much time. Let me tell you, after a year, I still think that this is one of the best gravel bikes on the market. Let's talk about why. Let's begin by talking about this particular build of the Aspero. Now, this is a friend's bike that he's loaned to me, and he's got a really cool setup. The first thing you'll notice is that he has 12-speed Shimano GRX Di2, which is a group that I've grown very, very fond of since riding this bike. It's incredibly smooth and precise, exactly what you would expect from Shimano. Now, this is set up with what appears to be a double chainring, but let me tell you, I've never once shifted out of the big ring on this bike. That's because this bike has a unique set of wheels. It has the classified Powershift wheel set, which essentially has a 2-speed hub that gives you all the performance benefits of a double chainring with the simplicity of a 1x. Now, this is still going through the build process, and eventually it will have a 44 or a 46 tooth single chainring up front to accompany the classified Powershift wheel set. We'll talk more about that later. This also has a set of the Pirelli Cinturato Gravel M tires, which are a little bit more aggressive than something I would traditionally ride, but man, they grip really, really well. Right out of the box, the Cervelo Aspero is stable, confident, and ready to go. Looking at it, you can kind of tell that it's on the more sporty end of gravel bikes, and it handles and rides as such. It's stiff, and when you hop out of the saddle, there's little to no hesitation in the way that it performs, and the way that it climbs, and the way that it responds to your inputs. The handling on the Aspero is superb and also reflective of the stiffer frame. This definitely feels like a bike that is made to go fast. Anytime you bear it into a corner, you're reminded that this is a stiff bike, but it's not too stiff. It still has enough of that forgiveness to eat up a lot of that gravel chatter, and it doesn't necessarily mean that if you come into a corner too hot, you can't correct just a little bit. I think that's where there's a fine balance there with the Aspero frame, and I think they've done a good job there. If anything, I'd say there's a hair of understeer that I don't particularly like on this frame, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing for most riders. I just found it to be something I didn't care for. On road, the Aspero doesn't feel too far off from a more relaxed geometry road bike. The main difference that you'll notice is when you hop out of the saddle, the frame is a hair softer, which again is what makes it a great gravel bike, and you've got heavier, beefier tires, so it just takes a little bit of extra effort to spin up the wheels. In terms of value, there's always going to be a less expensive bike out there, but Cervelo has done a great job of pricing the Aspero line very competitively, and it's one of the first things that attracted me to the Aspero in the first place, being one who was kind of considering getting a gravel bike but wasn't sure if I wanted to dabble in it. I think the Aspero is a little bit more of a safe bet when it comes to pricing. On the low end of the Aspero pricing at $3,000, you can get a complete bike with GRX mechanical, and on the high end, you can get a complete bike with 12-speed GRX Di2 for about $6,000. Definitely not chump change by any means, but I think if you compare them to other brands in this space, I think you'll find that the Aspero is very, very well priced. You know from my Athos videos that I love a bike with a clean, simple look to it and an understated nature. And I think the Aspero checks all of those boxes. If it's in satin or matte black, even better, which this one happens to be. With the exception of the little cutout on the seat tube, I really, really like the lines on the Aspero, and I think it's one of the best looking gravel bikes on the market today. Whether or not a bike is a good single bike solution or a do-it-all bike, I think really depends on your needs and wants from a bike. If you want a bike that's gonna be fast on gravel, that's gonna get you quickly to the gravel and quickly home, I think the Cervelo Aspero is a great choice. If you want something that's gonna be able to hang with your friends on a group ride that's a little bit more casual, but you can also veer off onto some dirt roads and maybe take a different path home, I think the Cervelo Aspero is for you. If you're looking to explore more aggressive trails or haul a lot of gear, I don't think the Aspero is the right bike. In fact, it doesn't even have the traditional mounting points that a lot of the more explorer type gravel bikes have. If you're like me and 2/3 of your gravel rides are spent on road getting to and from gravel, I think the Aspero is a great option for you, especially if you're not riding incredibly chunky, technical, and aggressive gravel. Listen, I bought a gravel bike because I wanted to get off the road for a variety of reasons. The first was, of course, safety, The second was just the ability to explore. And the third was just sheer fun. Riding gravel is so much fun. The Aspero was the gateway to all of that. And for that reason, I'll always have fond memories of that bike. And look, it's incredibly fast, it's stable, it handles really, really well. That's why I think it's a bike that works well for most riders out there. And that's why I think it's still one of the best gravel bikes on the market today. And at the price point, I just don't think that it can be beat. If I had to give this bike a score based on my needs and wants, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's a very, very safe bet if you're a seasoned gravel rider and you're wanting something that's a little bit faster, or if you're someone who just wants to dabble in gravel because you're like me, you're sick of being on the road, you're sick of cars, and you just want to explore something new. Now, how does it compare to the Crux? Well, that's the million-dollar question, and we're going to talk more about that next week. If any of this interests you, feel free to hit that subscribe button. A like goes a long way. Until next week,